So we got our guest, Nick, here. He's going to help us break down. If you heard any of our previous podcasts, Nick is the skeptical one when it comes to DC.
Yes, he likes to pick a lot of DC stuff.
We've been using that phrase. He is our designated Marvel fanboy. Helps us out. Helps us get that little niche together so we become the ultimate podcast of greatness.
Exactly. Yep. We got to get the other side on here, argue some good points. If you have 3 hours to waste for whatever reason, don't waste it on Batman v Superman. Waste it on our Man of Steel podcast, where we break down all the entire Man of Steel movie,
and it's longer than the movie.
It is, yes, with Nick. It's good stuff.
Or even our breakdown of comic book movies of 2016.
Oh yeah,
which that whole sector between BVS and the end of Civil War, that thing runs about 70% of that fucking conversation.
I will agree with you. Not waste your time on Batman v Superman. That sounds perfect.
Oh wow!
See,
okay.
Why did you hand that to me?
I don't know. I totally did. Set and Spike.
And so this episode is going to be also very special because we're going to have another guest on. We had a little pre-recorded thing with our guest Mike, who's been on for our wrestling ones and has been part of some of our other discussions about comic book stuff. He's a big Batman fan, so we had to give some of his perspective. Why was Batman such a bitch in this movie? I gotta ask him why.
Yeah.
He doesn't give me an answer, but you'll want to hear it.
And then we also have our good friend Tim. Unfortunately, not pre-recorded. We had to get an Instagram message from him. He's on the complete other side of the world from Vermont, and he's in the good old UK. So he sent us his review that we'll be reading as well right before we jump into our spoiler talk.
Yep. So first we're going to start off with non-spoilers of Justice League. A full non-spoiler discussion. But then after this, it's going to be non-stop spoilers. A bulk of the podcast is going to be spoiler. Because there's no way to talk about anything else other than spoiling the movie. So,
yep. Pretty much.
So I guess we'll start off with our non-spoiler with Nick, our guest. He will give us his non-spoiler outlook on Justice League.
Okay. It's funny because, we literally just saw this.
It was funny, yes!
We literally saw this last night. I don't know why, but it felt so underwhelming to me. It wasn't bad, which I think I mentioned earlier when you and I were talking, but it wasn't that good either. It felt solidly okay. I'll definitely say it was way, way better than Batman v Superman, but that was because that movie was a garbage fire and made me want to die. But,
Don't worry, Nick does not over-exaggerate anything.
No, of course not. I am not the most over-exaggerated person ever.
No.
I will say that there were a couple really good parts of Justice League. I do think that the fight scenes, for the most part, were pretty enjoyable. I did like, and I'm not even gonna lie, I don't know the guy who plays the Flash. I can't think of his name.
Ezra Miller.
There we go. Ezra Miller. He was an okay Flash. I think I liked that they incorporated some jokes with him and talking about the fact that he has to run so fast and it ends up burning all of his calories, and so he ends up having to just constantly be eating it. Like that, they kind of threw that in there. I thought it was okay. I didn't think I'm really bad at the names today. Steppenwolf. I didn't think that he was a very memorable villain. I thought that he was just kind of generic random big guy. He kind of reminded me of you guys mentioned Thor Ragnarok. He kind of reminds me of Malekith from Thor: The Dark World. He was just kind of I am big, scary monster guy that leads an army against the heroes. He felt very kind of one note. And so I didn't get a ton out of Steppenwolf. I do have to laugh that I do think Batman was a bit of a bitch. I will definitely agree with that. But it was just kind of a brief run over. I mean, it was okay. It was not as horrible as Batman v Superman, and I actually enjoyed it more than I think I did Suicide Squad. If we're going to look at the Marvel MCU or the Marvel. Oh my god, Marvel! Wow.
See, he's got so much Marvel on the brain.
Because I'm just thinking about good stuff and trying to block out all the bad stuff.
God Almighty!
I mean, I told you guys. I told you guys this last time when we watched, or yesterday when we watched the movie, that I will wholeheartedly admit I have yet to see Wonder Woman, which I'm being told is the best one, and I know everyone's going to yell at me and say, "Oh my God, how could you not see Wonder Woman?" I have time issues. I'm a little busy, to say the least. But of the DC movies that I have seen of late, Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, maybe Man of Steel's a little better because I think that I felt like Justice League was just a little underwhelming. It didn't feel like it was trying as much as I think Man of Steel and even Batman v Superman. Like, Batman v Superman was a mess to me, but I think that it actually, you could tell like they were like, let's just do all these crazy stuff. But Justice League felt very contained, very like concise, which I mean in some ways is good because it means that they didn't try to do super ridiculous things that utterly failed. But it also means that it kind of left me feeling like, all right, that was a TNT Sunday afternoon movie. Like, okay, it's there. Like, I'll put it on. It might be on in the background if I'm doing like laundry, but it's not anything I feel like I'm going to put a whole bunch of attention towards again. But it had a couple moments which I enjoyed. So I mean, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. It was okay. Solidly okay.
I like how you kind of ended that off a little bit. We'll touch on a little bit more things I think in our spoiler talk.
Yes.
So I'm actually just gonna, if it's cool with you, I'm just gonna read our Instagram post.
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
That kind of summarized our non-spoiler feelings, and then we'll add a little bit more to it. So the night that we got out of the Thursday showing, or actually it might have been the next morning, we put out a Justice League quick non-spoiler review before recording, just to kind of give people a brief idea of what we felt, and this is what we wrote. This is kind of Matt and I, doing some editing and coming up with an agreed non-spoiler type review. So I put Justice League non-spoiler review. A comic book come to life. Justice League is a fast-paced 2 hours of entertainment. It features a simplistic storyline with great team chemistry. Although the Elfman score is bland at times, the theme songs and interactions between the JLA we never thought we'd see in a live action were something special. It's a mixture of Zack Snyder visuals with Joss Whedon dialogue. This melding of views could be good or bad depending on your comic book movie preference. Marvelistic, comedic approach at times, but blended well with the action. Steppenwolf wasn't as bad as some critics have said, and had plenty of enjoyable scenes. Overall, a lighthearted addition to the DC movie universe, nothing to propel the universe, and only ties up some things from BVS. Despite the great fan service, it ultimately left you wanting more, and may leave us with another ultimate cut. Thanks for double dipping yet again, WB. By the way, stay until the very end, you won't regret it. So that's just kind of, quick summary.
We'll get to the very end when we do the spoiler section.
Yes. So that's just kind of a quick brief summary of, our non-spoiler thoughts. Is there anything you wanted to add, Matt?
Yeah, just briefly. When we first saw this, I would even agree with Nick I was very underwhelmed by it the first time we saw it.
Oh my God, hold on, Matt, you're agreeing with me on something? Oh my God.
Hold on. There is an expectation I had going into Justice League, and I knew it was going to be chopped up because it was set for 2 hour runtime. And I had a feeling that it wasn't going to meet what I wanted out of Justice League. And so when I originally walked out, I actually thought about it. I'm like, this movie sucked. Like, I can't believe they did this, and what the fuck is going on? I felt the dialogue in this movie, the editing, and other choices for like colorization and the way the movie paced along, it reminded me a lot of Thor Ragnarok. And I hated how that movie was structured. And I was seriously sitting there contemplating, like, am I really going to hate Justice League as much as I dislike Thor Ragnarok? Because that's how I felt when I first saw the story. Or first saw the movie. The second time we watched it, I kind of knew what I was expecting now. And it was almost a complete 180. Like, I was like, okay, I can actually enjoy this movie now because I'm not expecting certain things. And that's kind of the that's kind of the thing with movies is I felt a lot of people expected something when they saw Man of Steel. They expected a certain storyline when they saw Batman versus Superman. This is what they wanted to see. It wasn't exactly what they wanted to see, so they hated the movie. That's just a rough approach for some people.
Yeah.
And I kind of
agree
felt
with
like in this one, I did that same thing again, where like I was like, okay, you know, I had these expectations. And when we get into spoiler, I'll be able to explain all those expectations. It still brought down the movie for me. But the second viewing was much more enjoyable than the first one.
Yeah.
Because I was able to sit there and just relax. I wasn't sitting there waiting for the moment that I wanted to see.
Right.
I was sitting there like, all right.
You knew that didn't happen already.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I knew that didn't happen. So I'm like, all right, just sit back and enjoy the movie. It is an enjoyable movie to watch. It's literally a childhood dream to see the Justice League on screen. You know, you see 6. That's not much of a spoiler. You see all of them together. You know, Unite the 7, go fuck yourself. You get to see these characters on the screen working together for the first time. So it is something to behold. It is something to enjoy. And definitely go out and see it. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Yeah. Don't let critics, don't let people's feelings towards it. Just go in there open-minded as possible. Don't do what I did. Pretty much is why I'm bringing that up. Yeah. Don't go in expecting a certain movie because it will bring it down for you. I still didn't get the things I wanted, and it still does kind of bring it down. But I realized the second time, I'm like, no, you know what? Just enjoy the movie and you sit back and just don't expect things. So yeah,
well put. Just to elaborate a little bit, be careful going in with the feeling of the Batman v Superman. The score is a little bit different. And the colorization is a little bit different as well. So
not a little.
that really can take you off guard at first. And Matt and I were kind of talking about this before we started recording and before we got on the line with Nick. But there's a first part of the movie that I'm glad we went to a second viewing because I missed it, being so in like shock and not really in a good way of the score and how they're coloring it and just different. It just felt way different. And in that, if as Matt was saying, if you go into this and you're expecting the same feel of Batman v Superman or Man of Steel, you're going to be like in the same shock of like, oh shit, this is not what I was thinking. And it could, right or wrong, bring it down for you a little bit as well. So, well said.
Yeah, there is one little thing I want to add. I originally, when we watched it Thursday, I was thinking like, you know what? If you really did like Batman versus Superman, if you liked the tone, the visuals, and how that movie went down, I would have said that you would not like Justice League. But I've seen a lot of people on social media, like if you ask them, and yes, people are reactionary and whatever they've seen recently is what's going to be the greatest. But I saw so many people saying Justice League, we put one out on our Instagram with the top rated DC movies. People would be like Justice League 1, Batman versus Superman 2. And I'm like, wow, that is just like, that 1 and 2 is just so different from each other. Yeah. It's really hard. It's really hard kind of for me to believe that you could really love Batman versus Superman and immediately be able to transition over to this one and really love this one. So that's what I mean. There's kind of an ebb and flow to those movies. Yeah. So again, the score, we can talk about this because it's non-spoiler, but the score we felt was a little bland, as he said. Yeah. There is some cool iconic moments. You'll hear them. But again, I thought this kind of, especially for a DC movie, the score fell flat.
If you heard our talk about Spider-Man, I think it was the first Spider-Man where I was bringing up Danny Elfman and how he has just kind of a generic like superhero score, that's kind of what this was. He borrowed from different things. I'll bring them up in the spoiler talk because there's certain moments. He borrowed a lot from different scenarios, and then the rest was just kind of there. And I've actually seen some people already re-edit scene Justice League scenes to Hans Zimmer Batman v Superman score, and it's like night and day difference. So it's kind of funny. That's just something, to kind of to be a little weary of. As Matt said, it could bring it down a little bit for you.
One thing too, Shane and I were talking about, kind of a little bit of a shock and awe, is that the visuals on this movie, the green screen could be perfect, and then there's points where the green screen literally looked like they bought an Amazon green screen
Yeah.
put it up, and it's like it's so night and day. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the reshoots. Is the reshoots the
feel like
shitty
it
green
does.
screen because they
Yeah.
didn't have time to render it properly and stuff like that. So there is some moments where CGI is questionable, green screen's questionable. Go ahead, Nick.
The CGI, when we get to the spoilers territory, there's something I have to bring up, which I know exactly what, I think you guys know what I will bring up. But there are certain parts in this movie where the CGI looks like it came from, like, 1997. Like, I was, like parts of it, like, okay, it looks good, cool, I like it. And then there are parts where I look at it and I'm like, how did this get into, like, a hundreds of millions of dollar movie? Like, this
Reportedly
is,
$300 million.
oh my god, yeah, because there are parts where it just does not look like $300 million. And I think that really bothers me, because I think that it's important to, you know, have kind of the reflection of the money put into it be actually shown. And I feel like, you know, it doesn't in a lot of points. It feels very kind of like drab, very again, like I expected, like, a lot of those scenes that are in the movie to be filmed on, like, a studio backlot at Universal.
Mhm.
Like, I'm like, wait, hold on, this is like what I would see in, like, Wizard of Oz. Like, they spent $20 on the backdrop, and
Yeah.
Right.
and so and it shows, and I think that was incredibly distracting during, like, some pretty significant parts. Some parts where it's like, wow, like, this is like a big moment and has to have this gravitas, and all I can focus on is, okay, the shading on this looks terrible. I can obviously tell this is not real.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and it took away from the movie, I think, for me, because I think that when you don't have that kind of polished look, you can tell, like, it's that uncanny valley where it's like something is just off just enough that you know it's not real. And so that was really hard for me to kind of, you know, in a couple points of the movie, I was like, well, there goes my focus on this scene. all I can see is, you know, giant space noodles and stuff.
Yeah, when we get into that, or when we get into our spoiler talk, there's a point that I want to touch on, that I had that exact moment of not hearing any of the dialogue because the CGI was so bad. So,
absolutely.
Once we get into our spoiler talk,
Which I think we're going to get into.
Yep, I think so.
If you got anything else, do you have anything else to add, Nick?
No,
non-spoiler wise.
No, we can. Yeah, like I said, I thought it was okay. You know,
Would you, as a Marvel fanboy, would you endorse this as a go watch matinee? Maybe
a matinee. I could see. I could see matinee. I could see, like, you know, watching on Netflix, or like watch it, like get it at Redbox just to kind of see it. But I think that, you know, Shane, you mentioned that this was like bringing a comic book to life and bringing, like, the history of something to life, and I think you both talked about, like, the gravitas of, like, this is such a big thing and not having that expectation. But I'm sorry, this expectation is there because this is the first time that we're seeing all these characters together, and, you know, when you can't stick the landing perfectly, it does come out feeling not as good as it could possibly be.
The funny part is, I think we will agree on that, but it will be for two different reasons. Only because I know how you feel about Zack Snyder as a director.
Well, again, I'm not against Zack Snyder as a director. I mean, he has some good stuff. This just is, you know, obviously Batman v Superman isn't it, but, you know, so I don't know. I felt like, just because this was something that I will agree with you, Shane. Like, this is something that I wanted to see since I was a child, and I know I do this a lot, but whereas the Avengers felt like something that I felt like something coming to life to me, the Justice League felt like, okay, that was neat, and, like, it didn't have that level of weight that I think it could have, and honestly, I think it should have.
Okay.